Hey, what's up guys? I am Follygon, and in this video we are answering the question, how many polygons is too many? Well, the answer to that is quite simple actually. It's however many you need. But how do you know how many polygons you need? Well, that's also pretty easy to answer, but it will be even more clear with a quick demonstration. So I've selected some of my students' work from the Appeal Academy, my course and mentorship program. These are from one of the very first sculpting assignments that involves a warm-up exercise and the practice of fundamentals. This isn't even close to all of them, but we'll look at some of these for this demonstration. If you are interested in learning more about my mentorship program, you can check out the link below or go to appeal.academy. So how do you know how many polygons you need for a particular shape? A great rule of thumb is the least amount possible while still representing that form. And you can most likely get away with a lot less than you actually realize. To help figure this out, we will look at the silhouette or outline for these characters and then focus in on one particular shape, the chest. So for this assignment, and many of you have probably already guessed, the character that they are referencing is that of Hellboy, specifically one created by the artist Gopgap. And the entire point of this assignment is to attempt to capture the primary form, what I often refer to as the blockout, and sometimes refer to as the silhouette of a character. The silhouette is a fantastic way for us to figure out how many polygons we need to create a particular shape. And we'll look at that very specifically here in just a moment. So just looking at a few of these, we can see that a lot of the main shapes are pretty close. Some of these a little bit more off than others, some of them pretty spot on. So our silhouettes are looking good for a lot of these, but in terms of polygon count, or how many polygons are being used with these characters, a lot of them vary quite wildly. So some of them have 3 million polygons roughly, some of them only have 15,000 or so. So which one is correct and which one is best for you and your workflow? The easiest way to look at a demonstration for this is to focus in on something hyper-specific, and to do that we are going to look at the torso or upper chest for this character. So if we take a look at this piece of geometry, we have about 408 points here. So not the exact poly count, but that gives us a rough estimate of the polygon count based on the number of verts that we have. And surprisingly, that's not a lot of polygons for ZBrush. 400 might seem initially like a large number if you're not very used to 3D modeling or high-resolution digital sculpting, but for this piece of geometry, in just a moment here, I can subdivide and add a ton of polygons to this piece of geometry. I just subdivided this multiple times, and in just a moment, I am already at 26 million polygons. And you can see it's lagging quite a bit. My computer is not a big fan of hanging out with 26 million polygons. Also, it's not really necessary for most things and not really necessary for this shape in particular. 6 million is very easy to work with. Anything less than that is kind of a cakewalk, but we don't need to use those higher poly counts for such a simple shape. So for this quick demonstration, I am going to keep our polygon count roughly around 1.5 million polys so that I can show you how you can figure out how many polygons you need for a particular shape. So we are representing our form here with 1 million polygons, as I just stated, but we can use a lot less, as we've already seen, to represent this form. So the way that I like to do this is by using the Z-remesher function inside of ZBrush. So I will make sure that this is on the default settings here, which is with all of these little toggles turned off, the poly count set to 5, adaptive, and then 50 for both of these. And then I'll just click on Z-remesher. So now we've reduced the polygon count quite a lot. If you're also curious about the target polygon count value here, this will try to aim for around 5,000, which is the default. But because we have symmetry on, you can see that it's taken that 5,000 value and roughly doubled it as it mirrored it across to the other side. So taking a step back with just a quick Control-Z to undo, we're going from 1.5 million all the way down to roughly 10,000. And we're still representing that shape extremely well. We can check on that by checking the silhouette of our form. So I'll hit V on my keyboard, or over here I'll just make sure that I have a black color selected and that I don't have my poly paint turned on under the subtool menu. So if I undo and Control-Shift-Z to redo or step forward, we can see that the silhouette for this form is not changing at all. And I'll go ahead and hide that reference image for now. So that is how we tell whether or not we have enough polygons for this shape. We should be representing the primary form or silhouette of this shape back and forth between those two states accurately. So now what I'm going to do to demonstrate this further is take this polygon count slider and lower it as low as I possibly can, all the way down to 0.1, and click on remesh once again. So now let's check on the silhouette for this shape again, and we'll just undo and redo back and forth between these two states. And as you can see, we're not actually losing all that much information from the silhouette. Now, we don't have necessarily quite the sharp bevel that we had wrapping around this form. It's not quite as nice, not quite as sharp. But in terms of the silhouette for that shape, we can still see the major apex of that form in the silhouette there. We can see it back here, and we can see it up top. So the silhouette is actually not losing all that much information. Now for me in particular, it not only comes down to silhouette, but it also comes down to a little bit of the surface detail or surface information. So this pinched edge in particular, I would like to retain a little bit better. So for me personally, 0.1 is perfectly fine to continue working on this geometry, and I could easily subdivide and project that form back. If you're unfamiliar with that process, check out my last video for my #1 tip for all ZBrush users. I'll put a link to that in the top right-hand corner of the screen. So for you, this polygon count might be a little too low. We're actually even lower than where we started, which was around 400. So there's no hard rule for what we need to aim for, but I'd like to show you a little trick here that I like to use to make this retain that shape even better. So this particular form wrapping around for this hard edge is what I'd like to retain on that lower remesh. So to do that, I am going to use a little trick with polygroups. If you're unfamiliar with polygroups, you can hit Shift F to visualize your polygroup information, and you can quickly create a polygroup by control clicking and dragging out a mask and then pressing Control W on your keyboard. You can do this in any number of ways with any number of masking tools. I'm specifically using a mask lasso brush here, which you can grab here by default. I have my own custom one that I'm using, but it's a great tool to quickly create some masks and polygroups, which are useful for a number of reasons, such as control tapping with your transpose line or 3D gizmo to mask off sections very quickly, or control shift clicking on polygroups to hide other pieces of your geometry to selectively work in specific areas. If you press Control W again without any masks, it will polygroup everything in that subtool. So now what I'm going to do is Control click and drag through this edge to create a simple mask. From the back side, I'll just hold Control and Alt and remove a portion of the mask from the back. I'll press Control W to polygroup it, and then we'll rotate back to the front, turn on Keep Groups, make sure that you're not using freeze groups, and I'll click on Z Remesher once again with the exact same value or target polygon count of 0.1. So there is our newly remeshed geometry with our Keep Groups function toggled on. And there you can see a huge difference compared to what we had previously, with now the form or general edge flow of our geometry wrapping around that separation from top to bottom. So now if we look at the silhouette between the two of these shapes, it's actually retaining that even better than what we had previously. So if I Control Z and Control Shift Z to step back and forth between those two spots, you can see that nice hard edge is retained through those two different stages. So now we have a super simple, low-res piece of geometry that we can continue to work with and easily manipulate as we continue forward. So for this piece of geometry, how many polygons do we need for this? Well, maybe roughly around 200 or so. If I were to go over top of this with the Z modeler brush or some poly modeling tool, I could lower this probably quite a bit more and represent this with even more simple geometry. But for something quick and simple right here in ZBrush with just a couple button presses in the Z Remesher menu, you can get some very good results in just a short amount of time. So for this piece of geometry in the chest, we do not need millions of polygons. As some of the examples here show, we can actually represent that form with quite a lot less. Having less polygons will make working with your geometry much easier. The higher your resolution gets, the more difficult it becomes to control, and the more unwieldy it becomes to control your surface. So how many polygons is too many? Well, like I said at the top of the video, it's however many you need. But figuring out how many polygons you need requires you to take a step back, look at your character's silhouette, and see the smallest poly count you can kind of get away with to represent that larger form. Hopefully you guys found this quick video helpful. If you did, click that like button, and if you'd like to learn more about digital sculpting, you can of course check out my course and mentorship program, the Appeal Academy. I also just released a new giant tutorial on sculpting the planes of the head. Definitely check that out. I'll throw a link on screen and throw one down in the description for that as well. But with that, have a great rest of your day, and I'll speak with you again in the next video.